hear me? So, I'm Heidi Rosner. I am a watercolor artist. I have been doing Celebration of Fine Art for 18 seasons now, and they still let me in. We've grown up together. Yes, we have. I was formerly a mechanical engineer turned artist, which was kind of the first risk I ever took. And I've been doing this professionally full-time since the late 90s. I love art. Art brings me joy, it brings my collectors joy, it brings people that walk through our show joy. When you can do something where people come back year after year and tell me how much they love waking up and looking at one of my paintings in the morning, or that they enjoy seeing my work in their living room every day, or that they just enjoy coming and talking to me at my studio every season. That's something that I'm very grateful for, and I'm really, really happy to be able to do that. So, that's me.
Good afternoon. My name's Ryan Schmidt of Markins. Can you hear me now? Is that better? Good afternoon. Gosh, I enjoy art because it's a release. I've got to do something, and I've got to challenge my brain to think outside the box and come up with some crazy ideas that wouldn't be part of a normal day-to-day job if I was working for somebody else. A little bit of background: my father had a playground industry, so growing up, manufacturing and selling and installing playgrounds, and that kind of set the tone for a lot of fabrication and manipulating of different products: plastic, wood, metal, landscaping, and everything. So,
how fun would it be to have your dad design playgrounds? That sounds like a dream job for a kid to have their dad do.
And to test it out.
Yeah.
Make sure it's going to hold up.
Make sure the slides are all shiny, right? That's where you got the shiny part.
So that's where I began taking the risk.
Yeah, okay. Very good. Carrie.
Hi. I have done this my entire life. I've never had a job, literally ever. I started entering art contests in high school in Utah, and they really had a good program of contests, and I won actually so many contests. I said, I'll do this. And I was lucky enough to get an art scholarship at Pratt Institute in New York City. So I was 4 years for free and lived in Manhattan and did covers for Sports Illustrated and Forbes and Business Week and Time and everybody. It was a lot of fun. But the internet kind of blew that out of the market. So risk and reward. What do you do next? So I've done this my whole life and moved around in the art world. And literally my hero became Andy Warhol because he was an artist since he was like 14. And man, the guy could adapt like nobody's business, do really well. And so I'm always looking at current trends, what's going on in decorating, popular culture, and what art markets are doing well. So it's a lot of fun.
I am Stuart Yankel, and I had the good fortune of growing up around a lot of art. My father is a scientist, but he had done artwork for my entire life as a hobby, and his best friend was a really accomplished artist who had worked in San Francisco with Diego Rivera, and he's my godfather. So I tell people that I sort of caught the disease from those two guys. And growing up in the suburbs, I was pretty good at school and sort of some more traditional track. And when I started college, I took some classes at the old Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts in Philadelphia, one of the oldest schools in the States, and discovered really the depth of the history of art, the Spanish and the Dutch and the Italians. And being headstrong at 18, I threw all the eggs in that basket and have never looked back. And it's been a beautiful opportunity to celebrate this life, and it certainly is a risk, because when you get out of school, I ended up with a master's degree and studied in a lot of different sculpture academies. You get out and there's no job waiting for you. But having exhibited all over the States and abroad for 35 years, I will say that this show shines particularly brightly with the dedication to the artistic community that we see brought to bear with Pogés and their whole team. So.
Thank you very much. So, aren't they fascinating? I always tell you, I learn something every week, even though I think I know these guys pretty well, because some of them I've known a long time, some more recently. But and so here's how the whole Art Discovery series works. By the time we finish during the show, which is mid-September, then the next thing we do is we start laying out the program. And the last page of the program I ever give them, because we're selecting images all the way along. The last thing we do is put together the Art Discovery series based on who's in the show, what kind of panels can we put together, what kind of cool topics, and we try to keep it fresh because we know a lot of you enjoy coming or watching, each week. So we want to keep them fresh and new, even though it's always going to be different with the different if we have the exact same topic. But again, this summer we were talking about what great ideas can we do. And then in my head I'm selecting the panel, so I know I've got enough people to cover it, but sometimes I forget to tell them that they're on the panel. But I swore I told Carrie over October he stopped by. So yesterday I'm like, hey, I'm really counting on you tomorrow. And he goes, before. So, and then I kind of discovered Brian. We were having a conversation. I thought, oh, this will be interesting. She does these giant stainless steel things. And then Stuart came up to me. So he's like, hey, I want to be on that panel. I'm like, okay. And you and so what we talked about that day at lunch is really your transition from the safe, what you were making a living, and one day you said, I want to push it. So let's talk a little bit about your first transition. Oh, you've got your better mic there. And I'll step out your way of your beautiful painting. So Heidi, take over.
Okay, so living my life happily, cruising along as a engineer, management consultant kind of thing. And I was living in Southern California. The Northridge earthquake happened, if any of you remember that, in 1994. Decided that I wanted to leave the earthquake zone and move to the next closest warm climate metropolitan area. Look at the map, Phoenix, perfect. So I packed up and moved to Arizona and didn't know a soul here, and I took a watercolor class to meet people. And this all started as a result of that. I went to the Scottsdale Art School, I took a week-long workshop. Yay, it's a great place if any of you haven't been there or taken a class with them. Awesome. And at the end of the week-long workshop, the instructor took me aside and said, I don't know what it is you do for a living, but you're natural at this. You should strongly consider doing this. So,
did you want to tell them about your materials you started off with?
yeah, I walked in, and the Scottsdale Art School is for practicing artists. It's not a hobbyist kind of school. I mean, a serious hobbyist, but it's not like, oh, I'm going to go take a pottery class, or it's not that kind of thing. I walk in and there's all these professional or would-be professional artists setting up all of their gear, and I walk in with my set of Prang watercolors and a pad from Target. I'm not even kidding. And I shrank into a shell of myself and said, oh, I'm in the wrong place. I'll just get out of your hair right now. And the instructor, who was very kind, said to me, if you'd be willing to invest in a few basic materials across the street at the art supply store, I would be willing to invest a little extra time this week to get you familiar with the medium. I said, okay, no harm, no foul. I'll take a risk. So I stayed, and it paid off. And I started painting on the side, and pretty soon people talked me into showing them paintings and they wanted to buy them, and I'm like, huh? Yeah, I'm still doing my consulting business. And one thing led to another, and I was certainly having more fun painting than I was consulting. And I started to make pretty good money selling my paintings. And the consulting business, although lucrative, just didn't have as much energy and excitement for me. So at one point, I just decided, with the exception of one client, who ended up becoming my husband, that I would get rid of my consulting business and move forward into the art world. And it was really scary, but look at where I am now. I mean, this is just, I'm living the dream. I really am.
What made you decide big, giant stainless steel was the way to go? As the first day I met you, I said, you know, you could do smaller work in and out of your truck.
That's true. It's true. A little history. I started out in origami, went through painting, photography, ceramics, printmaking, got into bronze, and moved into stainless because it holds the polish. And found that when I'm putting them outside, that it really, the reflections just change, sunrise and sunset, and it incorporates the environment. And, so I haven't felt like breaking out of that much, since I got into it. So it's really stuck with me. But it was a big risk to begin in the realm of being an artist. Of course, you got to have some income. So I was waiting tables for about 10 years prior to getting fired because I had to do an installation out of state. So I came back home and it gave me the push to just really focus on the artwork, and I haven't looked back in about 10 years. So it's been a wild ride, but definitely worth the return. Be able to do what you want to do, not have a time frame for waking up or going to bed, whatever. So I just enjoy making the decisions.
That means sometimes waking up at like 4, right? And you thought, I have an idea. The other morning you said that. So I'm going to come back to you a little bit later to talk about scale, because
Sure.
I think that's pretty relative to the risk conversation. But Carrie, have you've done multiple types of work, mediums and different things. You are one of the most, like, your brain is always kinetically going.
Right, yeah. Literally, when you look at, I think Susan always tells us that art is like a metaphor for all of us. Like, do you want to be exactly the same person you are today, 5 years from now? Where do you want to be? Where do you want to go? What kind of routines are you into, and what do you want to become? So behind Susan is what I did for the first probably 8 years of Celebration of Fine Art. And they did really, really well. They were a lot of fun. They're kind of like muted acrylic oil pieces. But gradually, as I started to do shows in LA or Miami, they just kind of slowed down. So you look at yourself and you say, okay, I did really, really well at this. Do I want to continue this or try something else? So I tried some metal pieces here at this show, and it's just perfect because you get to see instant reaction. So it's not like I made the transition to this immediately. I put out a small copper piece to see what people would think, and it sold immediately. And then you think, okay, let's try a couple more. So now this year, everything is aluminum. It's kind of like what Ryan said, is that shine is really big. It's a lot of fun. And this is done terrifically well all over. This is only one show that we do. We do shows everywhere. And these have done exceptionally well in California and Miami and Seattle too. I sold these to Boeing, Costco, Amazon, Bungie, and they've been just a total delight. And all my collectors, most of them have bought every single facet of my work. They like my aesthetic, so that's fun. But it's scary because if you've done so well with a type of work, yeah, where am I going to go? So you try it little incremental steps. You put out a test and then see what people think. So if you came by my booth today, you're going to see some brand new things. I won't tell you what they are, but it was really cool because I had about 5 ladies come in today and they just gaga over my brand new idea. And we'll see here where that goes. It's kind of embryo. It's a perfect place here at Celebration of Fine Art to get reactions from Stuart and Heidi and everybody. And then also you, it's called your basic gut reaction. And when I first came into the tent, I would actually count how many seconds it took for people to notice your work. And it was 2.5 seconds. So you got somebody walking by, it'd be 1,000, 2, 1,000, and then they'd look to Stuart or somebody else, okay? It's now down to 1.5 seconds. And so, I don't know what that says about our society or your minds, but unless you get their reaction in 1.5 seconds, they're walking by you. And so you better grab them quick, somehow. And so I call that the capture factor. And this has worked, this new dimensional stuff. So anyway, rewarding.
Do you have a question? Same question.
Tell all of us why you said I want to be on that panel.
So, we spoke this morning. We have an artist meeting every Friday and learned Susan's interpersonal skills. And I told a story about this 6-year-old boy that was standing in front of a massive painting of mine the other day, and he looks at it and he says, "Well, that looks like it took 1,000 years." And I said, "I'm going to be quoting you for a long time." I've already quoted him like 80 times, but the fact of the matter is, like, it's so true that we're essentially part of this inherited language that has come down, well, 10,000 years or however many centuries we delve back. And I happen to be particularly interested in, a great many different periods of art. And today with the internet that we have, we're so connected to so many international styles. And my training had really gone deeply back to old classical portrait painting. And then, over the years in my career, I've really made an effort to kind of be all over the map. Like a lot of my favorite artists have done travel painting, so I've painted in like 15 countries, and I would always push to stay with drawing. Like you see, there's a black and white ink painting here, and then I have a bronze sculpture to the left. And I've always found that the more diversity you can bring to bear, the more the language sort of circles back into itself. And an interesting part of my own background is that when I was seven, my parents moved back from Montreal to a house outside of Philadelphia. It was an 1880s arts and crafts style house that had this gorgeous inlaid wooden ceilings and stained glass in every room. And in the stairwell, there was this massive stained glass of a torch. And I think it might have been a convent or something, this place. It was pretty exotic. But besides the stained glass, there was an inlaid stone, cement relief of a woman kind of dancing under a tree. And here I am 50 years later, and I've begun to paint on these acrylic surfaces that you see here that have this sort of stained glass quality, and I do a great deal of musical and dance themes, often, with a single, that's not too heavy enough, often with a single female dancer in a stained glass format. And this piece is indicative of the fact that we ended up buying a house. The show's been that good for us over the years, and we bought a house up in Cave Creek, and suddenly all our neighbors are horses. And I'm, exploring the equestrian theme this year with the risk and potential reward. So with the acrylic painting that you see to Susan's right behind door number 2, those are actually started on the back side of the surface. And what I'll actually do is take the digital image that I develop and flip it in reverse, because that's what's going to be coming through from the back. So for a man, you have to think like a woman on the back. And the same for a woman, you got to turn around and think like a man on the back. Nobody's seen the joke. So I'll paint the backside, actually more like Jackson Pollock, where I'll be working flat on the floor with very wet and fluid passages. And it's a bit of the roll of the dice, because you're never sure how it's going to look until you turn it over the next morning and see where it is. And then I'll just continue to paint on the front side in oil to really formalize the rest of the piece. And I've been these musical and dance themes forever. I tell everybody that this one is my wife and I, and we actually took dance lessons last year for our daughter's wedding, but the teacher kept separating us to our corners like a boxing match. So.
Up with them. We've got 3 spouses here. We have Mary Ellen, Dennis, and Janice. Yeah, they do deserve applause, don't they? By the way, I was going to say, with or without spouses, all of these people are extremely incredible business people on their own. Sometimes people will say, well, you can do this because your spouse does that job. These are career professionals, like, awesome. I don't know why I felt that, but by the way, did you see how I was holding that aluminum piece up with my fingers wrapped around it? Back in the early days, we would get jury photos from people with their paintings leaning on a chair or fingers holding it. Back in you've been coming for 30 years, you might remember. The work's gotten better, and so the jury process over the years. All that's very important to putting together the right package. But so Stuart, you also brought something new this year, which is kind of interesting, is some sculpture that you and your father did together. What inspired that?
Like I said, my father has he's a research biochemist, but he's been doing artwork for 60 years, and had always loved Giacometti, and now that he's retired, he's out in the park in central Philadelphia doing Tai Chi for an hour and a half with the 100-year-old Chinese people at 7. And then he sculpts for 4 or 5 hours. So he's also living the dream. And so he and I have collaborated on some pieces that I have in my booth, sharing some of the tango themes. And he did a theme of embrace for our daughter's wedding last year. And he has his version of a Rodin that is on exhibit as well, his thinker. And they're really glorious pieces as well.
So you've inspired him through your work as well. So one thing, again, I've just met Ryan. I think his work is spectacular. The other 3 I've known and watched much of the transitions. And one thing that's really important in my view is, even though the work has changed dramatically, there's still a sense of continuity to know who the artist is. So they haven't departed so much from their palette or their style. It's still recognizable, but we're seeing that growth pattern, and that's kind of cool. And Heidi, you're presented with a pretty good challenge from one of our very best dear clients, and tell them what you used to be known for and what's happened to you now.
So, I've come a long way, baby. When I first started doing this show, I painted exclusively watercolor on paper that was matted and framed. I haven't painted on paper in a dozen years at this point. Well, maybe 10 years. But I evolved my medium partly because of the expense of matting and framing, to be honest with you, and partly because my collectors were, shall I say, reticent about frames with glass. There's a lot of windows in the world, and when people hang artwork with glass, even non-glare glass, there tends to be sometimes an issue with glare. And it's a separation between you and the image. And I wanted my work to be more accessible and less of an issue with that. So I started painting on canvas and on wood panels. I relied on my engineering skills to develop a way of doing that I really like, and it's pretty extensive, to accept hard letters, pretty extensive preparation process, brownies, going to all that. But it's been really successful. So it was a risk because traditional watercolors on paper. I walked away from traditional, stepped into a new substrate, if you will, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. So I probably, unless there's something specific that a client wants, I probably won't be painting on paper ever again. I don't know. I don't like to say never, but maybe not soon. So this led me to be able to do some interesting collaborative projects with other artists. And one of my dearest collectors and friends, who's in the back of the room smiling away, tasked me, Paul Reimer, and Gideon to come up with a project that we lovingly titled the Africa Project. And they had gone to Africa, and they had collected all kinds of different photos and experiences from their journey, and they wanted us to put together a diorama, a travelogue of their experiences in both paintings and sculptures. And we created this montage of 10 or 11 paintings and 15 or so sculptures. And if any of you want to see photos of that project, I'd be happy to share afterwards. But I did this project most of last spring, early summer, and when I was finished with the project, I realized I wasn't finished with Africa. So I kept painting some of these images, and this giraffe is a sample of one of the images that I created for the project, but after the project. And the response, this is what actually we started our risk and reward conversation at lunch with, was that, wow, I can't believe my client took a risk and had me paint animals. Because I started as a landscape artist and I moved into botanicals and was dancing around the edges of some birds here and there. But I'd never painted anything like this before. And she and Todd, her husband, trusted me, and I immersed myself in the project, and now I'm a wildlife artist. Like the way that sounds. So big risk, huge reward. The response has been amazing.
True story. They're flying out the door. So, and that again is one of the best things about the celebration of fine art is the collaboration with you, the viewers and the guests, and how you all inspire the artists to elevate and something they're not going to find anywhere else. We got a little artist over here. We're going to check back on that later. All right, I want to talk about scale because, again, first of all, how many of you have really experienced a lot of stainless steel art? Okay. There used to be, I was trying to tell Ryan the other day, there used to be a gallery on Main Street. Doug, do you remember? Bennett Sculpture, that's who it was. But I've wanted to have a wonderful stainless steel artist here for a long time, and finally we found one, or he found us, we found each other. But you do a lot of large scale, not very much small. And a couple things I think people might be interested in. How do you get it to be stainless steel? And why do you like the large scale?
Well, there we go. I've always kind of had a motto, I guess, throwing up when you're expecting things or trying to build stuff that the bigger the better. It just creates more wow factor, and it is a bit more of a challenge. And that could be what makes it fun for me too, because I like to try stuff that probably wouldn't seem logical. But I started out with a lot of sheet metal projects, a small sketch, a doodle, and that's transferred to a large sheet, usually 5 by 12 foot sheets of stainless 10 gauge, 8-inch material, and freehand cutting those out after they've been sketched out on the metal. Cut them out with a 4.5-inch grinder, and using and stuff to create dimension. Put a lot of tension in the pieces via straps and clamps, and stretching the metal. It's a lot of I would call it origami because it's very similar to the folding and dealing with a two-point surface. But as far as presentation goes, when I've done shows, when I've done exhibits, always get way more response on bigger pieces, and this fueled me to just keep going in as big as I could go. So I maxed out the size of the sheets, with the designs that I had. Don't know what they're going to look like when I'm done, but the risk is there always while you're working. There's a lot of danger for me, cutting off fingers and burning yourself and stuff. So there's a lot of ways to be injured, but the reward is great because when the response comes back from you guys, everybody else, it totally makes it worth it.
I'm glad to see all 10 digits there. So, and he's got a beautiful piece outside here that when we finish, I would encourage you to take a walk around it. And when we first met, I asked you what you thought about the piece that I called the wrong name, but Cloudgate. How many of you have been to Chicago? And a lot of people call it the Bean, but its real name is Cloudgate, the stainless steel piece.
Artist is Anish Kapoor.
Anish Kapoor, yeah. If you haven't seen it, you gotta go. And Ryan and I talked the other day about, wouldn't it be great to have some public art in Scottsdale by this guy? Yeah. So we're gonna work on that. But how does it get shiny?
So it's several steps of sanding, and that's done with orbitals, directional, like auto body finishing, air tools, and stepping it from 60 or 80 grit all the way to 2,000 or 3,000 grit sandpaper. As you get higher in the numbers, you take larger breaks, but there's still about 15 steps to get to where you're putting, a final wax on. Lots of cotton wheels and rouges in the final steps too. So it's pretty it's pretty nasty when you work with it, covered in black material everywhere. It's best to be all suited up for that.
Yeah, we're working on maybe getting a container situation so he can do some work out in the parking lot. Do you have like a room he has to walk through before he comes in the house after he's worked all day? Like a decompression room or something? Okay.
She just asked me to take my clothes off.
Oh, that's a whole other topic. But on that, we are going to try to get a situation where we could maybe see some of this in action. There's the downside to some of our big metal workers like Michael Jones and Carlos and Ryan that, because of for safety reasons, we can't have it all happening right here. But there are portions that can be done, and we'll put something on Facebook if we make that happen. But yeah, it'll be fun. So, have you had some work operations already or installations?
Yes. One of my larger pieces is at the Governor's Mansion in Arkansas. It's about 4,000 pounds for a structure to suspend a teardrop piece. And the design was cut from a 20-foot by 8-foot sheets of stainless, 1/4-inch plate. And took several guys to look that around and get the actual pendant suspended in the Arkansas Art Center for a Tabriz auction. And the purchaser ended up donating the piece to the governor's mansion afterwards, and it sat on the ground. But I had suspended this piece in the foyer, and so there it sat for about 7 years. And the current administration looked me up and figured out now that the sculpture is supposed to be hanging. So we went through a series of designs and concepts to get this thing up and suspended. And after picking one out, they presented it to their committee board, where they had not everybody agreeing. So they fired the board, we hired a new board, and the project finally started a year later from that day. So, and it took about a year or so to get the project finished. So 9 years later, we're working.
That's great.
But I have some larger works in Miami, down on Brickell Avenue, downtown, right across from Four Seasons. 15-footer and a 12-footer, and the 15-footer withstood Irma, so it was all the nicks and scratches from the hurricane, left a few marks on it, but the piece is still standing.
Okay, and then how many of you are familiar with Art Prize in Grand Rapids? Yeah. How many? You've been. And you've been participating?
I've been in Art Prize for 4 years. This will be my 5th year. Back again with another piece, and like my motto, big is better. I've always done it with a 12 larger sculpture, and totally worth it. I'm going with the big piece. So.
Yeah, we've
A lot of
had
fun.
a number of artists participate in Art Prize, and some collectors that were very involved in putting it together as well. Can you tell them a little bit about what Art Prize is?
So Art Prize is I've been doing it for 10 years in the city of Grand Rapids. And what it is a competition. It's got a jury vote and a public vote. And anybody who wants to participate can sign up and put in an entry. And there's about 250 venues who you'll link up with online and decide, either they'll reach out to you or you can reach out to that venue, whether it be a hotel, a coffee shop, or a gallery, or a museum, or a public place. There'll be about 1,500 or so artists will compete for these, about 500,000 projects between these two, the jury vote and the public vote. And it's really amping up the city for about a 3-week period. I think the last study that was done was about $23 million in revenue for the city, because the streets are flooded with people coming in to vote for all these art competitions and art installations. It's a lot of fun.
And it's like 12 days, right? A week and 2 weekends, or longer?
It's every bit of 3 weeks,
Yeah.
probably.
Another thing we'd love to have come to Scottsdale,
It'd be
something
a lot
like
of
that.
fun.
But
Artprize.org.
Yeah.
Check out.
um,
It's usually September through the first week or so of October.
yeah, Santiago Michalek and Matt Sievers have done it, and Bryce and Allison, and yeah, I think there's like the Amway Center participates too. So some of the installations with the bigger things, you go to a bank or a big corporation or a public site like that. But, anyway, so I think just ultimately, I recognize that you all have taken risks, and the reward part is pretty awesome. I mean, Carrie and Stuart, I've heard you guys talk about your travels, for instance, and how you incorporate art, either inspiration or painting. I mean, you've been all over the world, Carrie. Can I tell him something else about you?
Sure.
Yeah. So he's not just a risk taker with art. He's sort of the Renaissance guy. He does everything. And how many of you have heard of the Spartan races? Anyone? He's a Spartan. Tell him your ranking. and what it is.
Oh, I'm 22 in the world in Spartan racing, and I got bored with marathons. And next week, if you want to come out and see me race, I've got a race, 7 miles. It's out at the fairgrounds by, is it Wekopa? Wekopa. And it's going to be up for the Olympics, and I had a chance to be on NBC, and it's basically you run a mile and then you go underwater, you run a mile, you throw a spear, run a mile, you got to climb a 30-foot rope, run a mile, do monkey bars from here to that wall, run a mile, jump through fire. Anyway, it's a lot of fun. In fact, right after this, I've got to run to my run-through race where I got to demonstrate for some other people. But again, a lot of reward. It's like, again, what's the risk? Actually, it's not too bad. But there's a lot of reward to it. How far can you go, as Susan says, a metaphor? So I'm 59, might as well do this right now, see what happens. So.
And Jake and I met the guy, Joe DeSena.
You did, yeah.
Who's the founder of Spartan Races. And he comes walking up on stage with, how much did it weigh? Like a 40-pound handmade kettlebell. He lost one in wherever he travels, he takes his kettlebell. And it had gotten lost, so he was in Japan and he had one made and he wanted it to be 25 pounds. And he told them pounds and they switched to kilos. And it's like, so he literally, he's all dressed in workout clothes, comes walking out with his kettlebell, puts it down on the stage, and he walks through airports with this. Goes through the baggage thing. Somebody was saying that they went up to Iceland. He goes all over the world doing these Spartan races, which I think sounds really risky, personally. But somebody said they were in the same hotel as him one day, and in the morning they kept hearing this, like, they're like, I bet that's Joe doing his burpees. Do you all know what burpees are? Yeah, so he does how many burpees a day?
I don't know, but the guy's a beast.
Yeah. And he goes, somebody says something about, should you take a break from working out? And he says, back in the caveman days, if they saw a piece of food running that they needed, they wouldn't go, oh, I can't run today, it's not legs day. So he's like, you can do it every day. So, I don't know what that has to do with art, but it is amazing. And Joe's in his 60s, I think, and it was quite entertaining seeing him. But we're proud of you for that, because all these artists are also multidimensional too, and to see that you can translate from brilliant, beautiful artwork to running a mutter, I don't know, it does a lot. Heidi and I just shop for therapy. Yeah, we shop. So, Stuart, I would love to have you share a little bit about some of your stories traveling and painting and the different places you've been to. Standing in the streets of New York and New Orleans and all the crazy street painting stories.
Sure. So I was actually just telling this story earlier today. I was painting in the streets of Jerusalem. These are 2,000-year-old streets, and this street was called...
It's double your age, right? Because you've been painting 1,000 years.
Basically, yeah. And this guy comes up to me and he says, we get into a conversation. He says, oh, I'm renovating this apartment right here. I thought you might enjoy seeing this. And he takes me inside this apartment and goes down like 2 or 3 floors, and each floor is like another 1,000 years over there. And there's kind of this renovated like TV room down there that's basically a cave with these massive like polyurethane stones with the sofa that's cut in around the place. And then he's like, oh, check this out. There's a 8-foot piece of glass in the floor, and you look down and there's a well that's lit up from the old rain gutter system that like worked through Jerusalem. So you just end up, happening upon these fascinating stories, and it's a great way to get to know the city. I'd go up to the vendors in the Arab market, and these are tiny little stone streets, and I'd be set up there for 10 hours painting the daily life, and I would say to a guy like, is it okay if I set up here? And they'd say, you are my guest. I will bring you the pomegranate juice and the Turkish coffee. You know, so you just kind of become soaked into a space like that, and it's a pretty glorious way to get to know a space. I remember I was painting in Venice in the city one night, and there was a woman not far from me who was singing opera, and she had kind of her boombox behind her and her water bottle and stuff, and she was rather attractive, had like guys throwing tons of Venetian coins in her case. And at one point, this dog walks by and picks up her water bottle in his mouth and trots away. And I went up afterwards and I said to her, I told her the line from The League of Their Own that there's no laughing, there's no crying in baseball, and there's no laughing in opera. And another abstract story, but I did want to tell one story about, we were talking this morning as well about questions that we hear so often at the show, and people say, you know, how do you know when a painting is done? And coming back to the idea of scale, I usually tell people that it's more like War and Peace. It's more like Tolstoy. Like when you come to peace with a work, then somehow you're able to, you know, step away and set it free like that. And in my studio at home, I sound a little bit more like Rafael Nadal. Like it's kind of the voice in the stroke, and I put large bamboo poles on my brushes, so my style is more like having a driver in a golf game. Like to get into the game, you need some big sticks, and then I have some finer brushes for detail as well. But I love the more physical and kinetic and gestural aspects of the work. And the beauty of this show and this town, in fact, is that with all the heat, you guys don't have second floors here, so all the homes are 16, 18-foot ceilings. And as a result, I've done like 8 and 10-foot scale pieces. And you know, that has really allowed me to expand as an artist over the years with different risk and reward.
All right. You do have a lot of fun, a lot of crazy stories here. Okay, so one of the reasons that we all love what we do so much is we love inspiring the future. So this beautiful young lady, I don't even know her name because I've never met her. Before we started, she had a blank page and she said, I'm going to paint this. Let's see, what year will you be? What year will you be 18? The applications will be online about April 15th that year. Oh, that's just great. Thank you for letting me share that. Riley. The future looks bright with people like Riley. 6 years old.
It looks like it took 1,000 years.
It took about a year. Yeah. So, anybody have questions before we wrap up here?
Ryan, I wanted to ask you, are your pieces, are they solid?
Can you repeat the question?
Are the pieces solid? They're sheet metal, so they're hollow and they're fabricated from the flat sheet. But I do work in some cast pieces in clay, and I do have a solid piece. So yes and no.
That was awfully heavy.
Yes, I've got a 40-inch piece that's every bit of 140 pounds. Yeah, solid 1/4.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
Why sunflowers?
Why sunflowers?
1,000 different other flowers. Why the sunflowers?
I've got 1,000 other flowers.
Well, what's one flower that's really special to you besides
Seems
sunflowers?
like it would be the sunflower.
I'm loving it. She just
I
finished
do
it.
love sunflowers because I am a sun worshiper myself. I love the sunshine. And the thing about sunflowers is their faces follow the sun.
Yeah.
And to me, they've always represented such a happy flower, and they're just summer and sunshine. It reminds me of Italy. It reminds me of sunflower fields. I get very nostalgic when I see sunflowers. But I also have a thing for poppies. kind of a crazy thing for poppies.
I won't touch that one.
Not that kind of crazy. I got all kinds of crazy, but not that kind of crazy.
So my mom planted sunflower seeds from scratch last April, and they ended up being like 10 feet tall, giants. Yeah, reminds us of the Midwest, right? So, good question. Anyone else? Yes.
I'd just like to know, Ryan, have you got some photographs of some of these other sculptures that you've got around the place? So if we visit you, you can show us?
Yes, I've got a book in my studio.
Because you get the excitement going here. And
Sure. We should be flipping through on a big screen, huh? Some
Yeah.
pictures.
The question was, does he have photographs of some of the other big work? And I think the other interesting thing would be the process.
yeah.
Sure, yeah. I've got some photos on my phone I can show you for process.
All right.
Sculpture.
But on my website is a short 3-minute video of a production of a piece.
It's a good video. I watched it.
Yeah, the one that actually went to the governor's mansion.
And yes.
The number of each of your sites here at the show.
Yes.
133.
Studio number 133 for Heidi. She's on this side, about midway.
Oh, I don't even know my number. I have red carpet though.
220. He's got the red carpet and the shiny stuff.
Red carpet.
So Stuart and I are right next to each other on 149, 150.
151. 156.
Stuart had to be special. He has a cross the aisle double. We have side by side, which we call double wide or wraparounds or across the street. Okay, Dennis.
What's next for Art Discovery?
The next art discovery
Photograph.
is thank you. Behind the Lens. That will be a good one with John Linton, Matt Seuss, and Carolyn Thome, our 3 resident photographers.